can hear you. You're there? Audio not working?
I'm here. Can you hear me all right? I think it might be your audio. I can hear you.
I hear you.
Can't hear me? I'm here. Sounds like your iPod's just joined the
Hey,
club. What's going on?
I got 16,000 things in here that connect to the AirPods. What's going on, brother? How you doing?
Uh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad we're finally able to do this.
Yeah. Look, don't rub the beard in so soon. I'm jealous. I wanna get there one day when I grow up, put my big boy pants on. But I'm a little gray these days.
Hey, all you have to do is put the trimmer away, man. You can do it.
It's not me, brother. It's the wife. She's the one that pulls it out.
You
Apparently,
know,
facial hair is ticklish.
this is true. It's an acquired taste for sure. That's for sure. Um, what are you drinking there?
I'm embarrassed to say. I'm gonna tell you, it's a Tecate Alta, which is a super low calorie, low carb beer. We are
Okay.
not we are not sponsored by them, but we should be. I've been drinking. I've been
I
drinking
should
the
be
last.
sponsored by water. Water with
There you go.
creatine powder. That's my drink of choice right now.
Water with creatine. Good Lord, man.
Yeah,
I've been seeing the
that's how I
keto
get through.
dieting and the creatine. First of all, you need to add something to the creatine. Water and creatine on their own, not so good.
The creatine is tasteless, so it doesn't. I sometimes put like a dash of like what's called a Mio. It's like a vitamin B with a little bit of caffeine energy thing, but I'll just drink the water with creatine in it.
Oh, I
It's
know
good
what
enough.
Mio is. Come on now. I drink a
Yeah.
gallon of water a day. I know all about it. And I got a small
So
bladder, so it's super ironic.
we work long hours though. So the thing is, like, we got to do those things, right?
Every once in a while. But then the problem is the second world coming in the studio and doing all the recording, all that, because it's not in my house. So we come to the second office. So I go from one office in the day to, home for a little bit to the second office. And then, I'll be here till like 1 o'clock in the morning. So yeah.
Wow, wow. So speaking of your second office, I've been following you for a while. First of all, amazing podcast. I love your content, as you know. I'm a follower. I'm always commenting and dropping you DMs on the financial stuff and financial
Yeah, man.
education and how unsavvy people are, surprisingly, and not paying attention to big picture cues. And I always appreciate your tips and the amazing content you put out there. So
Thanks,
kudos
man.
to you on that.
My
Um,
co-host Saeed is listening in right now while he's driving here. So Saeed, what he's trying to say to you is he likes me more than you.
yeah. Saeed, I don't know you, bro, but I'm sure you're good.
Not
Uh,
as good though. Not as good. Big asterisk. Yeah.
so, no, I figured, for people listening, people like myself, people who want to start a podcast, you've been there, you're extremely successful with it, you've built an audience, you're continuing to grow. I figured we could do a series on
Hmm.
building and launching a podcast and starting from the first granule, which is putting together a studio. You just did this.
Yep. I just did
Um,
it. Yeah.
and I'm going to do it next. And so, for everyone listening, I mean, it's kind of like you could watch a 2 hour YouTube video or longer and still not know like what the heck to do and how to put this together, right? So
Because there's so many options, it becomes overwhelming. It's like you Google something as simple as like how to drink water, and it's nebulous. And there's 1,001 ways to answer that question. Building a podcast can be done 6 million different ways, and a studio, for that matter, can be done the same as well. So I get it, and I did the same thing you did. Is I Googled it, tried to research it, but it was actually our buddy Adam Mind Pump from Mind Pump. He has the number one fitness podcast in the country, him and his partners in the world, frankly, where he actually let us come in and sit down in the studio and kind of check out what he did, where all the things started to come together. Where this is as big as you're going to get. They built it out, and it was from them we were able to take kind of the bits and pieces and really build what we have here, which is kind of cool. So, well, I'll tell you, as an asterisk, you don't need all this shit if you want. If you want a good podcast, we actually started our podcast with one microphone and a Shure SM7B. And we had one audio interface, which basically takes your XLR cables, because these things have XLR cables that plug into them, these little bad boys here. And it goes straight into an audio interface, which was a Scarlett 2i2. It's like $100 piece of equipment. It's not even expensive. And it was that in a garage. And that's how we got started.
Is your Scarlett something like this bad boy here?
That is a Scarlett 2i2, right? Yeah.
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 I use mine, not as much as I'd like, but I use it to, I'm a hobbyist guitar player. So I've got little mini home studio, and I've got my Yamaha HS8 speakers, the 2.1 and the Focusrite interface and all that. And I'm like, you know what? I could probably easily segue this into like my interface for a podcast, right? With mics.
100% you can. Now, what I'll tell you, the challenge is with the Focusrite, it's a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 or 4i2 or 4i4, depending what you have. The problem with that is unlike something like what I have sitting next to me, which is the Rode Podcaster Pro, which has got 4 different audio inputs and it's got a USB, a phone, and a Bluetooth. Plus, it's got a mixer already built into it. You can use this to have 4 people plus extra audio coming in to really have a larger kind of podcast setup that you can grow with. Looking back on it, the 2i2 was a great piece of equipment, but this, for I think it's like $500 or $600, is probably a better long-term investment for your growth.
So this is one of those IG lives. We always record and we repost, and we do like little shorts and stuff. So I think this is one that people need to take notes on. So tell me again what your piece of equipment is that you just mentioned, where you can have up to 4 mics that you can plug into. What interface is that?
So this is a Rode Podcaster Pro, and I can actually lift this up here, and you can see it. So maybe not. I'll get it up on screen, but I'll put a link and everything for it later on. But it's basically an audio interface, but it's meant specifically for podcasting, and it allows you to take the 4 different mic XLR cables in. You don't actually need like a cloud lifter, which I have here if you want to see it. It's one of these bad boys here. You probably know them from the audio world. They basically just take your audio and level it up a little bit so you can get a little bit more crisp audio. But this actually comes with power out, so it'll power mics like these, the Shure SM7Bs, which you need a little bit of phantom power for to get the really crisp sound that you want from them. But the Rode Podcaster Pro is meant for podcast kind of hobbyists and all the way up to the pros. There are other more portable setups you can also use that are out there. So there's lots of portable, smaller interfaces if you want to. And if you're going to take your podcast on the road, a lot of guys like Ben Baller, who has the Ben Baller podcast, he uses those. He uses a smaller piece of equipment that's more mobile. And those work totally fine. I like this if you're building a studio, because you can also have people call in and you can deal with this, and you can you have a lot more capabilities with this than you do with another type of setup. But even the Mind Pump guys, they use a smaller, more portable setup for themselves. So it really comes down to personal preference.
So that Rode Podcaster Pro audio interface you just mentioned, the Rodes, yep. You can have people call in, and how does that work? I mean,
there's 2 different ways you can call in. The first and easiest way is you actually just plug your phone into it, and they can call a dedicated mobile phone. So I have 2 mobile phones, and I'll just use one. I'll use the telephone number on it. So, for example, if you have a service that's a web-based IP where they call in and you have an 800 number, you can have them call into your 800 number. So I use a service called Grasshopper, and I have all my corporate accounts through that, and I just added an 800 number just for the podcast. So if we ever wanted to, people can call in the 1-800 number. It's plugged directly into the audio interface, and I can just go to the phone and I can control the levels on the audio interface or callers in. And
beautiful.
The idea about this setup, and the reason why I like this, is there are more complex audio interfaces. But for someone like me, so Saeed will normally sit right over here to my right. We have a window set up, and I'll show you the studio once we get a little farther into the setup. A window for a mixer on the other side of the window, so somebody can sit there and actually do all this for us. But for right now, and for most of the shows, it's between us. And we could actually man this while we're talking. It's so simple that it's easy for us to edit sounds and do whatever we want on the fly real time. Because the more you can do it real time while you're recording, the less post-production work you have to do in editing the sound and the quality of the audio.
Got it. So let's take a gigantic step back for a second. So we'll go through equipment and the setup and all that, but what's kind of, walk us through how you turn your equipment on, and 1, 2, 3, what do? You record, there's pre-production, post-production. How does that all work?
Oh, so I actually had to learn this all. So you can be the smartest person in the world at whatever you do for a living, but some of this stuff was so foreign to me that I had to learn it all from the ground up. So one of the things you'll figure out really quickly when you do this is anybody can load up a podcast, and the production value really changes with your desire and your own skill. As you start to get better at what you're hearing, you'll start to get better at what you want from your podcast. So when we started originally, you could easily start with just recording your own podcast and putting it out there. But from a production standpoint, you want to clear up the small things, the burps, the background noises, any hummings that might be there. And if you tend to speak in a way that has pauses, you want to chop those up and clear them out. So a really well-produced podcast will sound very clean and very clear and very crisp audio. And that comes from not only the audio interface and good microphones, but it also comes from you doing the post-production and editing your audio. So when you want to get started, the easiest way to get, no matter what your audio interface is, you turn your audio interface on. I always recommend, and not everybody does this, Joe Rogan does this, is having a pair of headphones. Because what this allows you to do is allows you to hear yourself speak. It's great when you're alone because you can really tell your tone and how the mic's picking you up. But when you're in a room with other people, what's really valuable for you is when you're doing your podcast is it actually stops you from speaking over one another, because you can actually hear in your ear what you're saying when they're speaking, and you'll tone out them if you speak over them.
Makes perfect sense.
That's why people like Rogan have them, he doesn't want to speak over one another. So you'll get in, you'll hit record, you'll do your thing, you'll record a podcast. I always recommend, if you're going to do this, you have a dedicated intro and a dedicated outro. For someone who listens like the Smartless podcast, theirs is always ad hoc and different every time. That takes a lot of production value and a lot of effort. You don't want to have to do that when you're just starting out. When you get more complex and you have more time, you're an entrepreneur, you got a business to run, you're probably not going to have that time. So what you'll notice from us is what we do is we have a clip from the show in the beginning, we have our intro, we have the show, and then we have an outro. And the reason why that works so well for us is we can come in, we can hit record, we can record an hour, hour and 15 minutes. And because of that, we can chop off that one little piece, put it in the front, have the intro, outro there, and it comes out as a really well-produced audio thing. So for the audio, for the back end, if you want to do your own audio editing, you can do that. There's a number of programs out there, most of which are free, and you don't have to pay for some fancy equipment. There's a couple of them out there I can probably pass along in the show notes later on that are free. You can just download, and you can literally edit your audio clips. And what you'll get with the Rode Podcaster is, and I'll show you right now, is you get a small micro SD card, and it pops out just like this.
Yep.
You can probably see it not so well in the light there, but yeah, one of those bad boys. You'll pop it into your laptop or your little conversion disc, and then into your laptop, and you'll upload it. You can then listen to your podcast all over again. We're at the point now where in size and scale, it doesn't really make sense for us to do it ourselves. So I actually have a post-production team that we pay. It's Jay from podcastyourbrand.co. He does all of our back-end production. He actually helped us launch this and gave us some great tips for launching it. You want to hear him?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you launch your podcast, the algorithm for both Spotify and Apple iTunes or Apple's podcast are very interesting. You don't want to go out slowly over time and gradually grow your audience on a new podcast, because the problem with doing that is the algorithm doesn't pick you up and you don't get noticed right away. So a lot of podcasts will say we're a top 50 or top 100. Well, what that really means is they've charted to that point, but they're not consistently there. That's usually their highest point of charting.
Got it.
And there's websites like chartable.com, which you can go to, and you can look up any website or any podcast, and it'll tell you where that podcast ranks. Listen Notes is a great one as well. So Listen Notes, if you go to Listen Notes right now, you look up the Higher Standard podcast, we're in the top 1.5% with a listen score of 39. That's my barometer to realize if we're growing and progressing over time, not really the downloads, uploads, and stuff like that to get into more complicated metrics. Those two websites have been invaluable, particularly Chartable, because you can see your analytics for your podcast, and Listen Notes, so you can see where you rank amongst your peers. If that makes sense.
Got it. No, that makes sense, because people always talking about we have so many streams, we have so many, but that's kind of like we have to make the website analogy. It's like, yeah, we have so many hits to our webpage, but what's your bounce rate? What's your conversion rate? Mm-hmm. Right? Those inner details matter most. So chartable.com, listennotes.com, right?
Yeah.
Those are two.
So for podcasting, consumption rates are also really important too. If you're putting out a podcast and someone's listening to 50% of it, I would say that's subpar. 60% is great. Anything over 60%, 70%, 80%, you got real audiences really caring about what you say, and they're going to listen to the end. So you want to shoot for higher consumption rates. And Apple's podcast backend data will give that to you. But when you launch your podcast, you want to make sure you go out with 5 episodes or more. right? And a lot of people disagree on this, but I always think starting with, so I recorded for 6 months before we actually launched the podcast.
Wow. Okay.
And the reason why is I wanted to get my cadence speaking on a microphone, because you're not always great when you start. And I also wanted to understand what I wanted the show to be and feel like a little bit better before I launched the show. And then I started interviewing people. And then I had this series of solo episodes and interviews. And that was the original format. And then later on, I realized with Saeed in the show, we had a much better cadence with one another. And it made the show much more tolerable because I'm kind of an asshole. So,
Yeah.
and since he's arrived, it's actually grown exponentially. And I think it's largely because of his talent, not mine. But that being said, when you launch the show, what you do is you launch 3 to 5 episodes. I prefer 5. So people who like your show can listen to it in rapid succession. So they're not going to go just one episode. They're going to go 1, 2, 3 if they can, or 3, 4. That consumption's there. And then don't tell anybody about your podcast until all 5 are loaded and you decide what day you're going to launch. And that's the day you tell everybody in your network, I've launched a podcast. Also, leave me an honest 5-star review. And what this does in the algorithm for both Spotify and Apple is that you're a brand new podcast with a lot of brand new consumption versus the previous week or previous quarter. You got brand new reviews coming online. And normally when you ask your network to do this, they all come on very quickly. And because of that, the algorithm gets triggered and you're going to pop up into the top 50 in whatever category you're in, whether that's business or entrepreneurship. You're going to pop up in there. And that's going to be a barometer for what you tell people your podcast has done. And that's really, really valuable on launch. Is you're going to say, we hit top 50 when we launch. But that only works if you do it that way. Got
it. And 5 episodes or more, right? So you could pre-film or pre-record 10.
Yeah, but I think 5 is kind of the sweet spot because it gives you about, usually let's call it, somewhere between 2.5 to 5 hours, depending on your length of the podcast, to go out with. And It allows you, the extra recordings that you did on top of that, you can then say, I'm going to put out episodes every week. When we started the podcast, we were out once a week, every week, and we bumped it up to now twice a week, every single week.
Now, are you doing streaming live also? Like some people like to do, live web stream, or is it recorded, there's post-production, and then you launch it?
So I've held off on doing the video for a couple of reasons, which I'll explain. So we have a full video setup. We've got 3 cameras that we typically use, one for front facing, one for each side. I need somebody in the studio to work the mixer that we have for that. And what I have is a Blackmagic, I'm blanking on the name. ATEM ISO is what we have. So it basically takes the 4 camera feeds going into it, and it'll record each one of the 4 independently. But somebody working the panel, when they switch to you're speaking or I'm speaking or Saeed speaking, what it does is that creates a 5th feed. And then what happens is when you go into production and post-production, you can actually edit that 5th feed. So if, let's say I cut to you, but it was before you were speaking or after you were speaking, I can actually drag it over and make that visually on you for a longer period of time.
Got it.
It's massive intensive. So that the ATEM Mini will take in those feeds from the cameras, and then it'll record it to an SSD drive, and I just give that SSD drive to post-production. The challenge that I have right now is one from timing and personnel, because we record this late in the evening. You'll see when I show you out here, we have a setup. We have an Apple computer set up outside that's going to be for an editor station. But right now, I'll send this off to post-production for audio editing, and I've got to find a way to sync up the audio and video in a timely manner that I can get it all out on time and consistently, because we drop episodes every I had to think about this, every Tuesday and every Friday.
So Chris, what about the idea that what if somebody's like, listen, I don't want to do all that for video, but I really want the video. Why don't I just do a Zoom setup where it pans to the person who's talking and at least gives people something to look at in addition to the audio? What do you think of that idea?
I think there's a great way to do it. I would say rather than the panning and zooming, what you do is you have one camera. And the problem is if you get most cameras for photography, like your Sony A6400 or your A6600, which are great cameras for video. Sony's are great for video. They have great automatic focus, but those will tend to overheat once you go above 40 minutes for podcasting. If you're podcasting at a higher resolution like 4K, which these cameras are capable of. Sony just came out with the FX30, which is a true cinema camera and has fans built into it to cool it down. I would get one of those to focus on just the wide frame with like a, depending on how much space you have in your room, anywhere between a 16 to 35 millimeter lens. And I would have that on both of you, so like right in front of where you'd be speaking. And then you could have it plugged directly into your YouTube for a live stream, and you can do it straight from that. Now, keep in mind, you're not going to, unless you can get a little technical here, you're not going to get the same quality audio that you would get from your XLR cables and your mics. You can, however, plug this into that FX30 if you get it, because there is an XLR input, I believe, or there's a way to get it in. So, but you won't be able to edit it. So if you edit your show in post-production and you cut out some of the burps or the pauses and stuff like that, you're not going to get that on your live stream stuff. That's the only sacrifice, but absolutely doable.
Got it. And so just to rewind a little bit, because this is a lot of great information. And like you said, doesn't matter how smart you are, there's a lot of shit getting thrown at you. So go back to camera. So we got, let's keep it simple. I've got one, Sony camera, whatever. I've got a nice SLR camera. We're recording live. Right. I've got mics now that go into, let's say it's a Bluetooth, microphone setup. You're mic'd, I'm mic'd. Would a person want to then input that into their audio interface, or would you want a separate set of microphones for the audio only?
You can do it both ways. You can absolutely do it where you record audio in one way. The problem is if you're going to stream it live into YouTube, you're only going to get the audio that you got live. So, but most people that I know of are actually, if you're doing video content, they'll actually record the XLR cables on their audio mixer. In this case, the Rode Podcaster Pro. They get that USB. They get the disc, the memory card. They'll just sync that. It's a really easy thing to do and sync in video production software.
Got it.
There's literally just a drop down. You can pick sync, and it'll sync it right up to your video. But again, you still have to edit your audio and then now your video, if you sync them in post-production, to match what you put out on iTunes, what you put out on Spotify, if you want that symmetry across platforms. You don't have to have it, and there's a lot of podcasts that don't. But again, for a working professional like you, like me, where this is not going to be your full-time gig, it really becomes a time sacrifice. You can absolutely, if you didn't want to use these microphones, and you don't have to for a podcast, there's a lot of really cool options that'll plug directly into your camera besides the XLR mics that you can use. I have a Rode set, which I think there's a couple different variants of it too, which are basically just hot plugs you can plug into you that'll feed directly into Bluetooth into the camera, and we can run around, having conversations. I actually have a DJI set, which just came out, which is really cool. It's a little box, and it's got two mics, and it's got a Bluetooth receptor for the camera. And you can literally, I can walk around the room and speak to you, and the audio level will be the same thing as my AirPods. And that's also an option. And it's also much more affordable than a $600 mic is.
How long do you take? Let's go back to sort of the launch. You said you typically, or you recommend you record 5 episodes or more, and then make your splash, right?
Right.
How long? In your case, you said it took 6 months, but let's say you're doing it over. And you're rewinding it back. Chris is launching again. Now you're going to tell your uneducated self, hey, the educated self says we're going to record 5 episodes. But how long did it take you to come up with those 5 episodes? First question. And follow up to that, how long should those episodes be? I mean,
yeah. No, great questions. It's different for everyone. So grain of salt. I started with the idea that I was going to do solo episodes of me just on the mic with 20 minutes. The hardest part of the whole thing was turning that mic on the first time and getting started and feeling natural. Because a lot of people, you can be an attorney, you can be used to being a litigator in the courtroom, and it's still something very different about being in a room by yourself, talking to yourself on a mic, and then trying to be coherent the entire time in a way that people will be receptive to. And you don't know until they hear it, right? So
that's right.
It's a very weird thing. So I aimed for 20-minute solos originally, and then we started recording podcasts together. We aimed for 40 minutes. And the more and more Saeed Guy and I got into it, the more and more we felt comfortable just talking. I think we feel as people getting into the space that you have to be communicating something at all times that has value per se. Your value proposition is valuable information consistently throughout your podcast. Well, that's not always what people want. Sometimes people want something as simple as listening to people talk. Adam just joined from Mind Pump, and Adam is the co-host of one of the, if not, the largest fitness podcast in the world, and one of the largest podcasts in the world. it was him who we went to visit, who taught Saeed and I that sometimes longer form format like that can be very, very valuable and be a very, very interesting exercise. And we found that as we went longer through some of the shows, we actually got better at podcasting, if you will.
Got it. So it's kind of like getting a certain amount of hours under your belt, just like as if you were doing anything else, right? Like you're a pilot, 10,000 hours is what it's going to take to get your license. And it seems like there is, and some people are going to be better naturally than others. But okay, so let's say I'm launching and people who are listening are launching. But like, you know what? I'm dedicated. I'm taking a week off during Christmas break, right? From the work, from the firm, this and that. I'm going to record all 5 of my podcasts in a week. Feasible if you have content that you could do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you that not only is it feasible, I think you could do it, but keep in mind whatever you're providing content wise has to have some value long term. So for Saeed and I, we recognize what we're talking about is generally relevant content to news and current events. So if we record 5, 6 episodes out, it can be stale. But if you do like interviews with somebody, generally speaking, those interviews will continue to last in perpetuity and will be valuable over time. So whatever you're recording, just understand there is a value to getting it out sooner rather than later in some circumstances. And if your content's that's the 5 you want to start with versus the stuff you want to backload. So for me, I started with stuff that had no expiration date, how to buy real estate, how to get into it. And then I backfilled every other week with interviews of people that had no expiration on it.
Got it.
That was kind of my original content strategy.
So it's always relevant. It's like tips on marketing to a certain degree, right? Unless you're talking specifically on how to capitalize on a particular algorithm change. It's what I would call like static content, like you said, forever content.
Right.
That people can go back and reference. So let's go back. Let's say you've recorded the 5 podcasts. Now you're launching. How are you getting people to click the link and listen? How do people know about you? How did you get people the news?
Well, when we started, we didn't. I mean, frankly, it's in large part due to Adam, who's watching right now, that we really started getting bigger traction and more people. But it really came down to embracing the fact that if you do this, you've got to embrace that you're a podcaster now. Big or small, we all win together. We all embrace one another's growth, and we all try to support one another to the extent that we can. And by doing that, your friends, your people around you, your peers, you have to rely on them for the good criticism, for the bad criticism, and for the growth. And as you get more ingratiated in this space, the more unbelievable people you'll meet who will be willing to help you learn little steps along the way. And then stuff like this really cross-promotes and cross-pollinates. But truly, for us, I think it had to do with our personal networks and word of mouth from those personal networks to grow it. Never in my wildest dreams did we think in the first year we'd be as high as we've come. And while we may have started it with no ambitions of a set idea, we've grown into where we see it in the next year. And I think that's exciting and cool. But one of the things, and Adam again taught us this, is we're not looking to monetize any of this. This is not a money-making endeavor. If it gets
interesting.
there, that's awesome. Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought you guys were that was your sort of your moonshot effort that you were going for, but not the case.
No. I mean, if we get there, that's cool and it'd be nice. And I make jokes on the show about being sponsored by people like Tecate Alta. But but the reality is our hope is to provide enough value to everybody to where they start asking us to sell them something. As stupid as that might sound.
Got it. Rather than try to push to make money. But there's a lot of people out there who want to just talk for a living, right? They're inspired by the Joe Rogans of the world, etc.
Yeah.
I mean,
you look, it's a great business. If you can do it, you'll crush it. But like anything in life, the more passionate, the more you're willing to do it without money, the more successful you will be. If you were truly passionate about it, because this is going to be your 5 to 9, not your 9 to 5, the more likely you are to be successful at it if you really like it. That's what that 6 months before you start is for. It's for you to say, this is fucking great, I want to do it, or I don't like this, fuck this, it's like having homework.
That's actually really interesting because those of you who are listening know that or at least who know my firm, I work with a lot of early stage internet companies, online world, and the early stage founders, it's always the same story, right? It's, I don't give a shit if I'm trying to break even right now. I'm trying to develop a concept, cater to a desire out there in the market, let them come to me and say, I'm willing to pay for this, not me pushing a price down somebody's throat, right? And so the idea of conveying value with any project, it's a passion project first. It's a labor of love. It's passion first. And then there can be a hook. You can offer a subscription, offer a product, get an endorsement, etc. Right? So that's that's interesting.
For you, depending on what you want to use it for, ultimately, most people I think get into podcasting these days aren't doing it for the entertainment value. They're doing it because they have an ulterior motive. I want to become famous, or I want to sell something. And there's no harm in saying I am a coach of some type, and this is my outlet for coaching, or one of my outlets for coaching, or it's an extra arrow in my quiver to grow my personal brand in the online space. Those are all fine and well and good. You can also, legal clients. I know in the law profession, in our professions, it's sometimes frowned upon to take these alternative means. A lot of law firms are very tight and very, very traditional, and to have social media and to leverage it. God help us if you leverage social media for clients, you're an outlier. And certainly to have a podcast is not without its stigma for an attorney.
True. And we're always labeled as ambulance chasers. I'm not like a personal injury per se lawyer, right? But that's what people think. Whenever you see a lawyer who's doing something creative, it's like, you're an ambulance chaser. But I also think that's why social media and alternative avenues like podcasts work really well, because it's not an advertisement per se, right? Like our Instagram account, or our TikTok account for my firm, we hit hot topics. We do hot takes on law. If there's something like, every time Kanye West says something stupid, it's content for us, right? Every time Balenciaga wants to accuse their ad directors of doing something stupid, we're like, you're the idiot. Here's the lawsuit everyone's talking about in New York. So it's just an opportunity to talk about what we do anyway, versus advertising like, call us now, that's not what we do. And I think
and you shouldn't have to. Your talent should speak for itself. And I mean, I'm a big fan, frankly, of the information you provide. And that's how I started following you in the first place, is I like a lot of what you had to say. And there aren't a lot of attorneys in your space who are as vocal as you are on these topics. I found it to be, frankly, awesome. So
I appreciate that. Something else, launching a podcast. It seems that, like with many things, niche market is the way to go. Like, you can't be everything to everyone. No. I suppose, there's people who browse podcasts just like you'd browse an Audible or browse a channel you want to find on Instagram. But it seems like the way to go is if you really want to add value, be niche. Find a niche that you have exceptional knowledge or you can add value in, and then build it from there. Is that prudent?
I think so, personally. But one of the things, so our name is not very niche-y sounding, right? It can mean anything, and there's a whole backstory to the IP behind it, which I'll save for another live we do. But we've always felt that we were in the entrepreneurship and business space, but we really didn't define a niche per se. It defined us over time. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to go into something with a very laissez-faire business plan. Find your voice, find what you like speaking about, because you as an attorney can cover a lot of topics, particularly those relative to what you do for a living, right? It could be as simple as talking about law as it relates to current events, or it could be diving into more complicated Supreme Court cases and how it could impact our lives. Or it could be all of those things. I mean, it doesn't have to be one or the other. So it really comes down. If you look at our show, and you look at the early days of our show versus where we are today, it's changed a lot from where we started. First of all, it was just me. Then, we have a co-host. We did a lot of interviews back then. We do rarely any interviews now. And some of that's just us kind of figuring out our new space and logistics. But it's okay to change. And I think the listeners also like that. They want to see you evolve.
When you first launched, did you make it clear that, we're in the financial space? How did you convey that? Was it obvious?
So, well, yeah, it was very obvious and very intentional, and I'll explain how. So your first episode you go out with, of those 5, should be an introductory episode. And frankly, ours is a bit outdated, so take my comments with a bit of hypocritical salt here. But your first, I recorded, and I think it was about 15 minutes. Let's go back and look at it. An introductory episode where I went completely off the rails. So I'm an executive at a publicly traded company. I have a law firm, a real estate company. There's a lot of people that I work with, and not everybody's going to resonate with my opinion. I wanted to offend everybody in the first introductory episode that was going to be offended and ward them off with not only a long introduction that we still use to this day, which talks about this is purely entertainment only. These opinions are mine and mine alone. But I wanted that introductory episode to really set the tone for I'm going to be explicit. I'm going to be fucking flamboyant. I'm going to say shit you might not like. This is not the views of my companies or the people that I'm with. This is my view. But I want to be able to share my view with you. And it's because of some of the things I talk about in that introductory episode. You know, I grew up poor, and I'm very grateful for the things that I have today. I grew up with not having access to the lifestyle that I have. And frankly, I think my life would probably be even more elevated today if I had financial literacy along the way. But nobody teaches you that shit in school. You're expected to go through school, and so I was obviously very passionate about this topic. I still am. So I recorded that introductory episode, and that was my first one out. And if you look now at the podcast, whether you're on Spotify, or you go to a website, or you go to iTunes or the podcast, Apple Podcasts, what you get is that introductory episode still pinned to this day. That's episode 1, and it sets the tone.
Let's talk a little bit about like launching the platform of the podcast. Are you automatically like, do you have to put yourself into a platform like Spotify or Apple, podcasts? How did you like plug yourself into being available? What platforms and how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So Jay Wong from Podcast Your Brand, he's the one who really helped me kind of figure this out on a more of a macro scalable basis, because obviously going into it, I knew I needed help. And he, to this day, is still the guy behind all of the inner workings of how we work logistically. And it's because of his expertise and knowledge that I figured this out. I did exactly what you're doing with him. And he basically called me a moron and told me to shut up, and I did it. So we don't go out direct to each one of these avenues. You certainly can, and you can upload them. But frankly, that's a waste of your time, because you want to be everywhere at once, not just on Apple Podcasts, not just on Spotify. And frankly, Apple Podcasts owns the market still, even though Spotify is growing. Most of your streams will be from Apple. That being said, we use a service called Captivate.fm. There's lots of services out there like them, but they're going to syndicate us out at the same time to all the platforms and well beyond just those two. And what you want to do is you want to set it up on day one where you syndicate out to everybody at the exact same time. And this allows you to be out there all in the ether. So when you launch your podcast on Captivate and you schedule it in advance, which is great, you can now push out to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Google and everywhere else all at the same time, even if you're not there, which as a working executive, you understand what I'm talking about when I say, I'll get up in the morning on Tuesday morning, that podcast is out there, baby, and I did nothing.
Love it. That's my brother, Kais, by the way, who launched a podcast with some buddies of his. And I think he suggested, or he's asking, is it similar to Anchor? I've never heard of Anchor. Maybe you know.
Yes, it is similar to Anchor. Anchor does the exact same thing. It's a syndication-based service. I like them a lot too. We just chose Captivate. They're all very much the same. They're kind of ubiquitous services across the internet. We like Captivate. We started playing around with it because they had some enhanced features at the time. It was making them a little bit different, but I think everybody kind of caught up. Some fun tech for if you do remote podcasting, interviews like this. There's a couple tips I can give you. I'm sorry. If this is too much, tell me to shut up.
No, this is excellent. Go for it.
I'm still sober, brother, so I can go on and on. And we're actually recording a podcast after this. I'll have my content team coming in here in about 20, 30 minutes, and then we'll record video content for socials. Then an hour after that, Saeed comes in. I got 2 guests coming in. We're recording the night, an actual podcast. So it'll be a full night of content. So you're the sexy to kick off the night.
Let's do it.
But if you want to record podcasts like this remotely, what we do is we actually have a different Shure mic, a Shure MV7. It's not as high up as the SM7B. This is the same mic that Michael Jackson used to record on. Not saying that I got that kind of skills, but this is the same one that you have to use on. This is really the industry standard. It's what Rogan uses. A lot of people use. The Mind Pump guys use a different mic. That's all good. They're also good ones too. This is the one we prefer. We use the Shure MV7 to send to people like you so we can record remotely. And the reason why is on the back of it, there's an XLR cable, so I can use them in the studio. They'll go directly into my audio interface, but there's also a USB cable. So if I send it to you, and let's say you're at home or Kais is at home, and you guys want to record a podcast with me, and now you have an XLR mic that I sent you, so I know you're going to sound sexy, you can plug it directly into your laptop. That way you don't need an audio mixer. So I can mail it to you, Federal Express, signature required. You'll get it. You'll get it ahead of your podcast. You'll plug it in directly with the USB cable with the USB cable that I gave you, and now you have this level of audio going into your interface. But then you say, Chris, how do I get the audio quality to come to me? Do they have to record it, send it to me? We use Riverside.fm. And what that allows you to do is it's a wonderful service. I switched actually from Zencaster to Riverside FM, and Riverside allows you to record just like this, but in 4K. And the audio from their mic streams and uploads the entire time. So even if they're cut off, it's still uploading. And yours streams. And what they do at the end of this, that service will give you your video and your audio and beautiful sound quality and beautiful video quality that you can actually use. And you can carve out the audio and use it and send it off to your audio production or edit yourself. Or you can literally make clips directly from Riverside FM to post to your social media. It's a wonderful service. If you do podcasting remotely, that's the way to go.
And so that service, I mean, that solves the problem of what if I have a beautiful Shure microphone and somebody has some shitty earpods, and there's a asymmetrical, yeah, right?
I
so
that a lot.
What do you recommend when people are doing these remote things? And let's say I don't ship them a Shure microphone. Is there a way to stabilize that and make it less asymmetrical in terms of audio quality?
So generally speaking, if they have, instead of AirPods, they actually have the cable version. Those work pretty well. So there is a slight lag on AirPods that we don't notice when we're talking to one another because there's lags on both sides. But you want something that's wired to the extent that you can. It's one less thing that goes wrong as well. But those work okay. Those actually work okay. They're not terrible. And a good audio back-end mixer can filter out a lot of the bullshit background noise and clean it up a little bit. If they have a better microphone than that, it's always better, but you can still rock with that. The problem is you'll get people at times, and it's always a younger generation, but shout out to you guys for having the balls that I don't have. They'll wear they'll have AirPods on, but they'll be walking around, or they'll be someplace where they're working, or they're trying to seem like they're busy. Like, I'm a hustle culture. I'm busy. So I'm moving while I'm doing a podcast with you because I'm multitasking. It's like, bro, this audio quality is dog shit.
Yeah. I forbid, I had an admin that was wearing the earpods answering phones because we have voiceover and you could be, you can use your cell phone to answer phone calls. You get laptop. I'm like, dude, cut the pods. Like, I know they're convenient. The audio quality just sucks. It's just not good. Use plugged in headphones, and that's like a baseline at a minimum. So I agree with you on that. There was a question by Zaid who said, many people want to start a podcast but don't know what to talk about. What do you guys think people should do to find their niche? Which I think is an amazing question. Any recommendations on that?
Oh, yeah, tons. I mean, I think people overthink it. This conversation right here, this could be a podcast. As simple as this is, I think the way human behavior is we're voyeuristic by nature.
Yeah.
And if you look down, if you really get ingratiated into the podcasts that are out there, and I've spent a lot of time now studying it, not because I want to do anything else besides see how everybody out there in different niches are really kind of rocking with it. There's generally things we like talking about, hobbies. You like music, right?
Exactly.
That could be a podcast. That could absolutely be a podcast. I have a friend, Parsa Vahid. I've been on his podcast. I think he's been on mine. He does fighting and finance. He loves fighting. He's in finance. Talks about all that shit together. It sounds weird, but it works for him. He's got some of the best MMA fighters in the world on his podcast, and it's a great thing for him. There's podcasts of, what my boyfriend wore. I mean, there's weird stuff out there. It really comes down to if you're going to do it alone, you got to have some subject matter expertise or more than just an opinion to kind of rock with it, right? But if you're going to do it with somebody else like this, bro, I could talk to you about beards for 5 hours right now, and I would not have a problem with it.
I agree. That's a great podcast topic too. Yeah. I think people see the success of Joe Rogan and they're like, well, I can talk about anything and everything, but I don't think they understand how long Joe Rogan's been at it. And what they don't understand about Joe Rogan individually is the guy is very studious. Like, he knows a little bit about a lot of different things, and he's a conversationalist. You could talk to that guy for hours. Not everybody has that talent, so not everyone can be Joe Rogan, even if they have the marketing bucks to throw behind pushing a podcast. They're just not interesting or don't have the depth to interview a variety of people, right?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a perishable skill, right? If Joe Rogan, if you watch him, he's very methodical. And as a podcast person and person who does this, now, my natural tendency is to go fast. I want to go fast. Boom, 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 boom. And Saeed half the time is like, bro, shut the fuck up, slow down, let's work this shit out, let's go through it. And if you watch Rogan, he has this amazing and uncanny ability to slow the conversation down. Granted, there's usually high, there's usually alcohol, a bunch of shit going on, but
Yeah.
he has this unbelievable ability. He'll slow the conversation. He'll go, yeah, and how does this work for you? Or he'll go, and he'll ponder a question in front of you. He's not afraid to have that silence. So it's any skill. You got to work on it. And I think for me, I'm at the beginning of that bell curve where I think I know more than I do. And Joe Rogan's at the top of it where he's like, he knows all the shit that he doesn't know. And that's what makes him so comfortable being him. And getting towards the top of that bell curve, that's that 6 months for you to get into it, because you're going to feel really, really good after getting a couple months in. And then 3 or 4 months in, you're going to be like, oh, this is all dog shit. What am I doing? But that's the learning process, you know?
So, we have to see your environment, your studio environment. I don't know if you can unhook off your tripod or show us around a little bit, but I'm a big fan of your acoustic panels.
Oh,
Now, is this studio in a commercial setting where it's surrounded by other studios, or is this inside of your office? Where is this?
You want to see up my skirt? Shame on you.
Exactly.
So this is the smaller law firm that we have in Lake Forest. So I'll kind of show you around here. So basically, you walk in, you got all the law firm stuff up here, and over here we have. Actually, let me turn the lights on so you can see over there. Otherwise, I'm wasting a little bit of time there. All right, so here we go. So when you go over here, you have. I mean, we have one office in here. It's where my office manager works, and then over here, you have effectively what we set up. This is the window I talked about for production. So we cut the window out here. This used to be an office. We cut the window out here. And I currently use it for snacks because I haven't got anything set up. But we have this set up here for where all the equipment comes out. There's a hole in the ground. And all this is where we're going to have the post-production. Basically, look into this window at the podcast studio. This is going to be our editing bay. And all this is effectively set up where someone can sit out here and watch it all. I know, sexy, right? And then
That's great.
Go in here, let me turn this around so I can point it out for you. All right, so when we walk in, we took what used to be an office at the law firm here. And we basically gutted the whole thing. And as we gutted the whole thing, you wind up having the sound deadening panels. You wind up having a little bit of the curtains here, which we think adds a little bit of sound value. And what we took variapoles, we put lights on them right here, so you can kind of see the lighting. And then as we go, and we basically set it up. And I'll break it all down for you. 1 second. I think the post-production here. Hold on a second. Let me run over. Hold on. That is content team. Say hi, content team. Yeah, you can tell they're excited to talk to anybody else besides me. So one of the things we did is we also set up backdrops here. So what we can do is we can pull them down, whether we're using a green screen or not, and we'll pull them down here so that we can, and I'll go over here. So we can pull them down so we can do green screen, all that stuff here. We can do all the photos here. We have a TV on wheels, and this is really important for when we podcast, and I'll explain why. So basically, the TV rolls out, and it'll roll up close to us like this, and we'll have the notes from a shared note, myself, the co-host, and myself, and we'll have a list of information that we're going to go through on the show. It's bullet pointed. It's only high level, but what this does is it allows us to know what we're going to speak about, and it allows us to stay somewhat on track. 55-inch is probably a little bit overkill, but I'm also blind without my glasses, so judge me later. But we learned this from the Mind Pump guys who have their studio set up, and you can go to the mindpump.com or Mind Pump Media, and you'll find their studio setups there and a lot of photos, but they have this in front of them and off the screen where you can't see it. When we went there to see it live, we saw it. We found it was incredibly useful for them because they can stay on topic. They can measure out each show from a time perspective because you'll figure out your cadence once you get going. You'll know if you need 15 topics or 4 topics to fill your set time.
Yep.
So that works pretty well. So we want to do everything off the ground. So we use variapoles to put everything up there, the lighting, all that, right? So just simple light panels on both sides for both Saeed and I. And then we have a second variapole here in front of it, which has got lighting facing the other way. This right here is the big one. This is a small rig, and we can adjust the light and the temperature in the room. So you'll notice whenever I sit over here that I've got a kind of an orangish tone to me. Yeah. This works really, really well with the default settings of a Sony. We found that color profile and this really ping off each other. The number one question I get asked is, are these panels special? Because there's panels all over the internet. How expensive are they? Do you go to Guitar Center? Do you get really high quality stuff? Do you not? This is the cheapest shit we could find off of Amazon, and we use liquid nails to put them up. Saeed and I did it
Nice.
ourselves, and I got to tell you, it works amazing. It is
Really?
unbelievably effective. So much so, and I don't know if you can probably hear the difference, but whenever I go over here in the corner, the actual tone changes a little bit.
Yeah, 100% it does.
Yeah,
100% it does.
so it changed a little bit. And then for background lighting, we did something interesting. This is a little bit pricey, but it worked out really well. These are actually Hue outdoor lights, and we can change the color. And these are another more Hue lights here. We have them all over in every single corner. But what this allows us to do, and if I step back far enough, you can see it casts up a little bit of light. So when I'm sitting here, it separates me from the background, as well as obviously the sign does, and that changes color, whatever color you want. But see, you can see over here in the corner. See how that kind of lightens up the corners there like that?
Yeah.
It's a soft way, so whenever I sit down and the cameras are on, whenever the cameras are on over here, it actually separates me from the background and works as a halo across it.
Got it. Got it. Where did you learn that trick?
I saw the Mind Pump Studio, obviously. Casey Neistat does this, and I watched a ton of. I would say the one thing that took me the longest and was the hardest for me to learn was lighting in videos. So I watched a ton of YouTube videos on lighting. A ton.
Got it. Got it. And you guys, you said you haven't launched the video portion of your podcast yet, right? Where you are?
No, my content team is just showing up now. We'll record content in here. We record it every single week for all the socials and everything else, and it's in literally the exact same spot, positions, everything else. I've done some beta testing of content video with the podcast, and everything is set up and ready to go. The cameras actually go on the Varipoles, and they hang down off these little things that we got, so they're eye level, and it's really cool. But I haven't found a way to effectively edit the content and distribute it the same way and the same quality. And I don't want to sacrifice the quality of the video and the audio to come out at different times. So Saeed and I are kind of working through logistics. Tonight, during the 9 p.m. session where we start, in about an hour from now when they come and we record the podcast, I actually have the guy who's going to be the audio mixer coming, and we're going to beta test, for the last time. And if he's good with it, I'll actually have him sit on the other side of that window, which I can show you here. This is also why we have the curtains, so you'll see, you can see all the way across this way with the curtains there. The curtains just add a layer of sound deadening because you can't obviously sound deaden this.
Yep.
And it keeps the room nice and warm. So
I forgot to ask, what device are you feeding your audio interface into? Do you have a laptop, a desktop? Is it a Mac? What is it?
So this bad boy right here is let me turn around here. You actually don't have to, you actually don't have to feed it into anything. It feeds, you can plug your laptop in, and it plugs in via the USB if you wanted to, but this actually is set up to work independent of a laptop. And you'll find the video stuff, the ATEM Mini is also set up that way too. And I think for a lot of people, that's a foreign concept. You're used to everything working through your laptop. But the more you can pull those functions out of your laptop or your computer and put them on an independent piece of equipment dedicated to that, the less physical memory you take on your computer. So video is a tremendous amount of data. Audio in this format is a tremendous amount of data. To pull that off your computer and put them on independent devices allows you a lot more flexibility. So we'll actually use the laptop on the screen to Google things in real time, kind of like what Jamie does for Joe Rogan.
And is that what is that? Is that a MIDI based device? What is the recording device you're using?
It's the Rode Podcaster Pro, the audio interface. So this is the one we were talking about before. So what
this is what you're talking about before. Got it. Okay.
Correct. So you'll hit record here like that, and it'll start recording when it's red. You'll see your audio here. So this is my mic 1 here that's hot. This is Saeed's mic here. This is the channels left and right. And then the other mics that you might have are 3 and 4 if they're plugged in. You have a USB drive, a phone if you wanted to, a Bluetooth, and then actually your sound effects if you want them. So this comes with sound effects that we have built in.
So if somebody wants to correct audio echoes, they can do it right there in real time, or is there another device that they're doing it off of?
No, that'll come from your mixing afterwards. So basically, there's a program called Audiology. It's free. You can download it. It doesn't matter if you're a Mac or whatever. It's operating system independent, and you can download it and use it. And that free service, what you'll do is you'll take these files and so when you take this out and you plug it into your laptop and you'll download the file, it'll give you a WAV file, and it's got several different. So it's going to have 2 channels for each one of these inputs. So let's say Saeed and I talk. There's going to be 4 different. There's going to be a left and a right for him and a left and right for me. It's very similar to the audio setup that you're currently working with for music, right? You
Yep.
can edit each one of those, and your job is to listen to that, and then as you listen to it, you can edit out those issues across your audio that you have, or you can level out sounds if you need it across the other way. These mics in this setup, as long as you're not someplace that's echoey or has a lot of background noise, and keep in mind, we started this in a garage. These things will cover almost 80%. If you have good mics and a good audio interface like this, you're not going to have a whole lot of editing. I would tell you 99% of what we get out of these things whenever we send it off for back end, it's show quality ready to go.
Got it. Got it. Good. So your recording is flat as possible. Anybody who's into audio understands. You're not recording with reverb. It's flat. It's, no sound effects, as straight as possible.
Mono. It's essentially mono is really what it is. It's basically two mono channels coming out that you're recording a left and a right. And I think for a lot of people who are in the space, that's a really weird adjustment. But when you're listening to it with the headphones, which is why I think they're so invaluable, particularly when you start, you'll recognize really early that it just sounds so good that you're not going to want to play with those things.
Love it. Love it. Man, this was more in depth for the first kickoff of what I hope is going to be a series than I was even expecting. So I hope everybody watching and listening was taking notes, and just a wealth of information, man. I appreciate you taking time out of the studio away from your prep and recording to meet with us and chat about this. Tell people where they can find your podcast.
Oh, we're easy. We're everywhere podcasts are. The Higher Standard, just search us in there. You can go to the higherstandardpodcast.com if you want to too. But just look, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we're there. And look, man, I consider you a friend. I love all the things that you've been doing, and it's been nice to chat with you. It's been cool to have another legal mind to bounce things off of. And I love the idea that I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but this is all relatively new to me. And I've had a lot of really cool people like Adam, like Jay, who've helped me. And anything I can do to help you along the way, brother, I'd love to see you in the top 1% in a year from now, and hopefully doing better than we are.
You're the man. You're the man. And early stage is the best to hear from it because you just went through the pain. So it's not so foreign to you, and we appreciate it. Thank you, man. I appreciate your time with us, and let's do this again soon.
Likewise. Talk soon, brother. Take care.
All right, Chris. See you.
Bye.